Hey everyone, this is week 3, day 4, and we are just continuing to talk about CRJ 700 systems, kind of picking up from what we left off the other day. Today you are going to be looking at the following items: communications, doors, fire and overheat protection, flight instruments, fuel systems and sources, ice and rain protection, indicating and recording system, referred to as ICAS, landing gear, aircraft lighting, navigation, oxygen and emergency equipment, pneumatics, power plant, water and waste system. So basically what you're going to do today is get back into that PowerPoint presentation that we went over on Saturday, week 3, day 3. And there are sections, individual sections on all of the items listed here on the outline. But what the overall objective is just to be able to kind of go through each of those systems. It really actually isn't very long, and in addition to this, there is no reading or videos or anything like that today. It's just simply this PowerPoint. But I want you to go through and take a look at each one of these sections and just be able to, get the key points down. I'm going to bring this up just so everyone can kind of have an idea. I'm going to bring up the PowerPoint here. So part of this we obviously already went over. So this aircraft general key points, all this stuff we already went over on Saturday. We already went over the automatic flight control system, so you can skip through that. We went over the APU. So communications will be the first one that you're going to look at here. Just be able to just kind of briefly just kind of describe what the communication system consists of: the passenger address system, radio tuning systems, the CVR, which is the cockpit voice recorder, the FDR, which is the flight data recorder, the ELT, which is the emergency locator transmitter. Then you've got the doors. We did kind of talk a little bit about the doors, but just know these key points. There's 9 external doors: forward cargo bay door, left and overwing emergency exits. We went over electrical already on Saturday, so go ahead and skip through electrical. We went over the environmental control system as well, so you can skip through that. Fire and overheat will be one that you need to look at. Just be able to look at the key points here and just know what the objective of the system is. In this case, the fire and overheat protection. Fire and overheat, there's 2 subsystems: detect fire, overheat, or smoke conditions, and then the fire extinguishing system, which has the containment and delivery of extinguishing agent to protected areas of the aircraft. Know which areas of the aircraft are protected by fire protection. Those would be the engine, the APU, the main landing gear. And then the smoke detection areas. The laboratory has a smoke detector. The forward and aft cargo bays also have smoke detectors in them. And the engine fire and overheat protection they can detect fire in the engine and when it's overheating as well. The cockpit crew can be alerted. So just be able to go through, look at the key points. All of the slides that say key points are stuff that you're going to kind of just want to pay more attention to and be able to know about each system. We went over the flight controls. You guys already wrote down the key points of this particular system. So flight instruments, Just be able to know what displays the cockpit has, what the PFD is, what the MFD is, and what each of those displays has on it. Here's a list of those things the primary display has. Get to know those things, be able to memorize all of those things. You'll probably see questions about that on a quiz right there, as well as the MFD. There's those items there. Be able to write down what the air data computers calculate for the aircraft, and you can see those there, the static, the pressure altitude, the static air temperature, and so forth. It calculates the ISA deviation. Anyway, get to know all those parameters there. The altitude heading and reference system. Be able to say and describe what that does specifically. The ISI, the Integrated Standby Indicator, provides backup attitude, altitude, airspeed, and magnetic compass information. Also displays localizer and glide slope data. The fuel systems. Once again, look at the key points. There's 3 tanks, a left wing, a right wing, and a center tank. The aircraft uses single point refueling, which just means they connect a nozzle to one spot on the aircraft, and they can fuel up all 3 tanks from that one point. This here talks about the fuel distribution. And look through those items. This talks about the fueling and how the fuel flows between the different tanks. There's a thing on here that talks about maximum fuel imbalance for takeoff is 300 pounds and then 800 pounds at any other time. So just remember those 2 figures there. We already looked at hydraulics, so we'll go ahead and skip through the hydraulics section. Ice and rain protection. We have talked a lot about this. We haven't necessarily specifically covered it on the 700 yet. This will talk here about which areas of the aircraft have anti-ice capability, and as we've stated before, the wing leading edges, slats, and engine intake nose cowls are anti-ice using the bleed air from the engine. This is also going to tell you where that bleed air comes from, so you need to be able to remember which stages of the engine, and it'll show you here on a different slide. All of the other stuff on the aircraft, the windshield, the air data probes, the ice detection sensors, those are all electrically heated. So you got the 2 different anti-ice systems. The wings and the engines used bleed air, that hot bleed air coming from the engine, and then the rest, the air sensor probes, the pitot-static tubes, all of the sensors, all those little tiny pipes and tubes that you see that stick out from the side of the aircraft, those all are electrically heated, and they warm up just using electricity to melt ice off of them. And then, of course, there's the windshield wipers, which remove rain and snow from both the pilot's and co-pilot's windshields. There's 2 ice detection systems, one on each side of the forward fuselage. This just goes on to talk a little bit more. The indicating and recording system, which is the ICAS. Just be able to know what that is and what it does. This is the system that records different components of the aircraft. It records critical aircraft information and system operation. The function of the ICAS is to display the engine instruments and visual and aural crew alert messages and real-time interpretation of the aircraft system operation. So this here is going to tell you exactly what it does. Just be able to tell me what the ICAS does and what this specific system is monitoring and what kind of safety it provides for the cockpit crew. Be able to tell me what the difference. See, it gives off two different types of warnings: a master warning and a master caution. So just remember that master warning. The two different types of warnings that it gives out are master warning, master caution. So here are the four levels of messages which it provides. A warning message would be red, a caution would be amber, advisory is green, and status is white. Just be able to remember those specific categories. These are the different pages of the ICAS system. You don't necessarily need to go through and tell me what's on each page. So all of these ones here, you don't necessarily need to worry about memorizing, but just be able to tell me overall what this system does and what its, what the function, why we have it on board the aircraft. The FDR, I do want you to be able to memorize what the FDR is. That is the flight data recorder, otherwise known as the black box. One of the black boxes, I should say. The other black box is the CVR, the cockpit voice recorder. The FDR records the last 25 hours of flight using solid state memory. It basically records everything, all aspects of what the flight is. When we look at the FARs, we're going to be looking at the flight data recorder a little bit closer, and you're going to be able to, at that point, know exactly what parameters that FDR is recording for us. The landing gear, I want you to be able to tell me which hydraulic system powers the landing gear, which hydraulic system operates the brakes. Be able to tell me what the BTMS is. Aircraft lighting. This isn't too terribly important for you to be able to go through and remember. It talks about the different lights that are on the aircraft. So the aircraft lighting, let's see, just talks about which areas of the aircraft are lit up. Not a big deal to be memorizing anything too much in there. The navigation system. Just be able to write down these things here on this page. These are all the different systems that it has on it. We've talked about most of these systems: GPS, TCAS, weather radar, localizer. This will talk about which each of those systems does, more or less, just briefly. The enhanced, this is the EGPWS, otherwise called the GIPWIS, is what you'll hear it referred to as, but it stands for the Enhanced Ground Proximity Warning System. So be able to write down these things on this page so that you know exactly what the GIPWIS does, what things it's looking for. Oxygen and emergency equipment. Just review this. There's nothing in here that necessarily is going to be too concerning that you need to really know. The only thing in here that you really might want to know is that those oxygen masks that fall down from the ceiling when the aircraft loses pressurization, those are provided oxygen from a chemical generator, and it provides enough oxygen for approximately 13 minutes. So if you see those things fall, the aircraft really needs to get down below 10,000 feet within 13 minutes, which is not very hard to do. They can usually get down very fast, but that's pretty much the only thing in here that you really need to look at and know. This talks about when and how the passenger masks are deployed. This talks about the emergency equipment on board the aircraft. This is the pneumatic system, otherwise called the bleed air system, is what this is really referring to. We've talked a lot about what this system does already, but the bleed air system gives us the engine starting, the cowl and wing anti-icing, and then also the air conditioning. This talks about the stages that of bleed air that are pulled off of the engine. That's the 6th and the 10th stage. So you definitely want to have that memorized, that we draw our bleed air for the anti-ice, engine starting, and air conditioning from the 6th or the 10th stage. This says specifically what it does here. The 6th stage of the engine compressor supplies air to operate the pneumatically powered systems. When system demand exceeds capacity of the 6th stage, high pressure valves automatically open to supply higher pressure 10th stage bleed air to the manifold. So it uses the 6th stage primarily unless it needs more, and then it opens up and also uses the 10th stage. Power plant, we already kind of talked about this, but this is just going back over the thrust of the engines. If you lose an engine, that the other engine can take over and provide additional thrust. Talks about the FADEC, which is a full authority digital engine control system. It basically monitors all the different things on the engine to watch for overheating, and also will automatically adjust stuff, your fan speeds and everything else that needs adjusting on the engine when the aircraft's in flight. You don't necessarily need to go into too much detail and know a lot about that. Know the difference between N1 and N2 though. Those are the different parts of the engine. And that's found right here on this page. This talks more about the FADEC here. This talks about what happens if one FADEC fails or if one engine fails. The APR just be able to tell me what the APR is and what the FADEC is. This talks about the thrust reversing system. Talks about how it blocks the air and reverses it and used to stop the aircraft. The thrust reversers are operated from the hydraulic system. And lastly, the water and waste system. Just look over this. There really isn't anything in here you need to memorize. And that should be it. So if anybody has any questions or anything, just obviously let me know. But as always, you want to be able to go over each of these little categories and just be able to write a sentence or two about what each of those systems does, and the other things that I individually went over as far as remembering the specific things that are in like the ICAS system, and just the other individual things that I mentioned on here that you'll need to know and write down would be the only thing in addition to just being able to just write more or less a sentence or two about each of these systems. So anyway, that should be it for today. And yeah, like I said, if there's questions or problems, as always, let me know. And if not, then we will talk again tomorrow.